Welcome to the Profit Answer Man, Jake Badsgard. It's great to have you join us today.
Thanks for having me, Rocky.
Can you share a little bit about yourself and your business?
Yeah, I might be the first guest on your show with 7 A's in their name. I've got Jacob Aaron Baadsgaard. There's 3 double A's in there. So that's probably a first. And I'm the founder and CEO of Disruptive Advertising, which is an agency that I started freelancing 10 years ago. And now we have about 120 employees throughout the country and service several hundred businesses that look for us to do their performance marketing for them.
Congratulations on that
Thanks.
success. And it's my understanding that Profit First had a little bit to do with that. So, how did you learn about Profit First?
I'm trying to remember who recommended it to me, but someone in my friend network said, "Hey, you ought to consider reading this book," because I had a really hard time taking profitability from the business. And so I would let cash accumulate in the operating account, and then I would always find a reason to spend it. And so it was very helpful after I read through that. It really changed my mindset on how I think about that.
And I think that's normal for so many business owners. They see money, they spend money. That's just the way it is. And it's life. Let's talk about that a little bit more, because that kind of gave you another aha about how to think about your business and what kind of happened. So can you share that with us?
Yeah, you bet. The first few years of the business were all about the hustle. How can I grow this? Let's see what's possible. Let's make it happen. And not really knowing what the end in mind or what the outcome I was looking for. And like a lot of entrepreneurs, I thought, well, I'll just grow it really big and sell it for a ton of money. And that's the dream, right? And so a few years in, the business was actually doing better than I expected. I was struggling personally because it was consuming my life, and I was struggling in most other areas as I was imbalanced in how much I was putting into the business. And at that time, I started to have some opportunities. We had crossed the 10 million in annual revenue. We had started to hit those EBITDA numbers where you get better multiples in my industry. And people started showing interest in buying the business from me. And I explored that with them. And once I understood how investors value a business, I was like, oh, I'm kind of reverse engineering your math, and you're just going to make sure the company is really profitable the next few years so that you can make your money back, and then you'll own the business at that point. And this is after I had read Profit First and had started taking more profitability off the table instead of just letting it accumulate or spending all of it. And I thought, Rocky, why wouldn't I just do that? Why don't I just run a better business for the next 5 years, create my own exit, and then I still get to own and operate the business that I love? And so I feel like Profit First is what got me into that mindset rather than prematurely selling. And the cool thing is, over the next 5 years, I created double the amount I could have sold the business for in profitability, and I still get to own the business. And so I feel like it really set me on a cool track.
It doesn't sound like you're working as hard these days.
Nope.
So how do you do that? How do you go from grinding in the business, spending all your money? Now we know how you stop spending money. You use Profit First, but then how do you stop grinding and get more out of the business and treat it differently? Like, what was that change about?
Yeah. The funny thing is, I don't believe in balance. I think life is fun because we get to go out of balance for a little while so that we know what it feels like when we come back into balance. And, I've got 4 kids. I've started a business. Like there's a lot of things that I have to choose not to prioritize in my life, which might make me imbalanced. And what I realized is the first few years, I experienced all of the grinding business experience that I wanted. I was satisfied. I didn't want more of that anymore. And so I thought, how do I do this smarter, not harder? And a big part of that is getting the business to the point where I can actually start to hire people to do the parts that don't give me energy and that I'm not the best at, And so I can focus on the things that I love and get the support and allow people to do the things that they're great at and that they love. And so over the years, while there is some turnover from time to time, I've been able to focus on who, not how everything gets done, and making sure that we've got the right team in place. And that's really what frees me up so that the time I do invest produces the best outcomes. And so I'm not spending a lot of additional hours spinning my wheels on things that don't actually help.
So there's so many different points in there. I have another podcast, Richer Soul, and Richer Soul, I came to realize something. The word balance has so many negative connotations and so many misinterpretations. And the reality is, you cannot live life in balance because there's no way you're going to get balance. But you can live life in harmony, which means that there are times where different parts are going to go on a sprint or be at the forefront. Sometimes you hear the drums, sometimes you hear the vocals. Sometimes business takes off, sometimes your kids need all your time, and these different things come and go. It's learning how to play them in such a way that it's fun for you and that you enjoy your song. But in order to enjoy your song, you have to know what you like, right? You have to know your values, you have to know your purpose, you have to know your systems. You have to decide what parts of the business bring me energy, what parts of the business do I hate doing and I don't do. And let's face it, for all of you listening, it's probably the financials. We get it. It's normal, right? And then having the courage and the plan to let go of all of that. Did I sum that up well?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well said, Rocky.
So that is always like what everybody wants, but then this question still comes back to how do you do it? I know you're a big fan of EOS. I'm a big fan of EOS. Did that play a part?
Absolutely. I think the thing that I would address before EOS gave me the structure, but I had to want it first. And when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And the principles that I feel like that lead to breakthroughs, whether that be personally or professionally or whatever that might be, is awareness, honesty, and responsibility. And so if I'm aware of, hey, I'm grinding all the time and this feels hard and I keep saying I want it to be different, but I'm not acting on it. I'm not doing anything about it. Everyone's aware of what they want, but very few people are willing to be honest with themselves. And so the question I would say is, well, what's the payoff? Why do I want to keep making this hard all the time? Right? And most people say, well, what do you mean? I don't want it to be hard all the time. I'm like, well, then why do you keep doing that? You wouldn't do it if there wasn't a payoff. There's always a payoff. And most people aren't willing to be honest about what that payoff is. So let me tell you one of my breakthroughs with my business. And this is a story that I've shared on other podcasts before, but that was a few years into the business. I was in the worst physical shape of my life, the worst emotional, spiritual. I was very volatile. And even though the business was doing very well, I was really struggling and not happy in a lot of ways. And through a marriage counseling process that my wife and I were going through, we had 3 kids. It was feeling really hard. And all of a sudden, and I won't go into all the details, but I had a moment of realization that I said, the business has become my excuse to not take responsibility for anything in my life. And because the business is doing well, I get to, I haven't wanted to change because that's my excuse to not take responsibility anywhere else. And it was at that moment where I realized that, when I was actually honest with myself, to say, oh my gosh, that is why I burn myself out at work, so that I cannot take responsibility anywhere else. That's my payoff. That's my payoff. I'm not the problem in this marriage. You are, because look how well the business is doing. I couldn't be the problem. I was 60 pounds heavier at that point and never exercising. It's not that bad. I'm not in that bad a shape, because the business is doing well, right? And so the honesty moment, Rocky, is it is the truth, and the truth is what sets us free. When we are aware of what's going on, what's very challenging for me to do is to be honest with myself of what is the payoff that I'm getting from this behavior that I claim not to want, but I keep doing it over and over again. And until I am honest about the payoff that I am getting, I cannot take responsibility. to change it. And so that's where I say awareness, honesty, and responsibility. Most people get stuck at the honesty part and go back to the behavior because there is a payoff that they don't want to admit to themselves.
Interesting. And thank you for the honesty to share that. Um, I don't think I've heard business owners say that with such clarity of knowing what the, in a sense it was a negative payoff, right? I mean, you got what you wanted, but not really what you wanted.
But there was a payoff.
But there was a
Yep.
payoff. And I think a lot of times we don't think about the price of the payoff, or we're told certain things, right? A lot of people look at profit as an event, not as a habit. A lot of people look at what you talked about, which is, oh, I'm successful in business, so my family will be happy. No, your family will be happy if you're home for dinner, right? And you're at the kids' baseball game, not because your business is successful. Or I have to work hard and grind hard to make money. That's not true. You don't have to. That's an excuse. And I don't know what the payoff of working hard and grinding hard and giving up your health. I mean, I guess the prestige of having a successful business. But then you give up your business to get your health back. And again, that's what it kind. How often do you see when you go sit down with business owners that they have defined their business core values and their life core values?
It's pretty rare. But I do have some questions that I feel like helps us discover them quite quickly. So because we're a marketing agency, we work with a couple hundred companies. And so we have the opportunity to talk to a lot of great business leaders, owners, those types of things as well. And they're always there, but sometimes they're not aware. And so my favorite questions are, why'd you start the business? Tell me about a customer success story that inspires you. And tell me about an employee growth story that inspires you. And when they tell me those stories, I learn a lot about what they really value and what really motivates them to run the business. And it's really fun to discover that with them because most of the time they're not thinking about it and have gotten caught up in I think I'm just supposed to grow revenue. Like that's my job, is to just always grow revenue. And when I say one of our core values, for example, is win-win-win. If the employee isn't winning, the customer isn't winning, and the business isn't winning, then it's not a sustainable solution or decision. And so when I ask them those questions and they tell me those inspiring stories, then I say, how does your growth goals align with creating more of those customer success stories and those more employee success stories? And they say, you know what, I haven't thought about it that way, but I'd love to start approaching business more that way. And that's when we get to the fun part.
Business is supposed to be fun.
Yeah.
If it's not fun, you're doing it wrong. and I think for a lot of people, they're doing it wrong. They go into business to make money and then they grind it out, or they're doing the parts of the business, like you said, that they don't enjoy, which makes even the easy hard. And you've got to take the time to think. And it's one of the biggest struggles I run up against is, especially in the early parts, well, we'll figure that out later. We'll figure out the values later. We'll figure out all of that type of stuff later. And I tell people this is the foundation. Because if you don't hire to your values, you just hire for skill, somebody's going to come in who's going to mess with your values. And you're not going to be happy with them as an employee. Your clients aren't going to be thrilled. Neither are your other employees. And so you've created a big mess. And until the ahas of letting that person go or realizing they're not in alignment happens, then that's the case. And I think too often, I always tell business owners, if you hire for values, you can get A players at a discount, versus just trying to get the best talent.
Yeah. Well, and I love the way you described that, Rocky, and the way that I feel that in my experience is I think we all have this light that's shining in us. And when we're with people that are in alignment with our values, they encourage us to let our own light shine brighter. And we do the same for them. And when we're with someone that is not aligned with our values, we feel like we have to diminish ourselves in order for them to be comfortable around us, or vice versa. And so, amen to everything that you've said. And that's what it feels like when there's alignment on values. It feels like, oh man, I get to just be more of me and they get to be more of them. And that's what helps us be successful. That's when there is great alignment on values.
It's fine. I've done it some consciously, some unconsciously. But what I have found, and the cool thing with the podcast, is it attracts my kind of people, because either they're drawn in or they're not. In our processes of going through clients and all of that, it's almost a pushing people away who aren't naturally attracted.
Yeah.
And so it prevents me from having pain in the butt customers, right? It just solves a lot of these problems. People go, I like the way he thinks. I like the way he does things. I want to work with him. Where they go, this show's crazy, and they're gone. And they're often, I don't even know they came into the ecosphere because they never showed up on my calendar. They never showed up anywhere. And so we've kind of naturally built that so that, because I built this business to have fun. And if it's not having fun, we aren't doing it. And so it's worked out well from that standpoint. And I agree with you. How often do you see, because what I've talked to you about is my marketing strategy, right? And it's in alignment with my business values, because our marketing and the way we do our sales kind of creates tripwires to get rid of all the people we don't want around us.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I love that.
And I think that's something that you do for your clients.
Absolutely. When you brought that up, for Disruptive over the last 3 years, we actually have a third as many clients as we used to. We used to attract a much smaller business, much smaller contract, with a lot of businesses that we actually didn't love working with. And when we got very clear about the types of people we like working with first and foremost, and then the size of business where we shine and do the best work for, we've actually been able to maintain and even grow revenue with a third as many clients as we used to have. And it feels way better than it's a big deal.
We're big fans of work less, make more. If you want to grind it out, you're in the wrong place.
Yeah.
And you're a perfect example of someone who's done that. So I think people are still wondering, like, how did that just happen? There has to be more to that.
Well, there's 10 years of life experiences that leads one to coming to these realizations. And most of it is by experiencing what it feels like to not do it that way. Right. And I like to think that I'm a quick learner. I'm actually not afraid of failing, and I would rather try something quickly, see if it works or not work, and then adjust and move forward. And and really, when you think about any business, it's, am I attracting and retaining talent that is aligned with the business and who we are and where we want to go? And am I attracting and retaining the types of customers and clients that are aligned with who we are and where we want to go? And I really think it just kind of comes back down to that, because then the business model, you could almost do any business and be successful with those two things.
And we have a saying, and I haven't said it in quite a long time, but we prefer that you run your business based on your values, not your bank account. And so one of the things that I love about Profit First is it gives people that little bit of excess cash that they're not always scrambling, in which case they're not having to take a sale because there's no money in the bank. They're like, that's a pain in the butt customer. I don't care. I'm not taking it because I don't have to. And I think that's the real joy and benefit of Profit First is the ability to say, no, nah, thank you, but no, thank you.
Yep. That's a powerful place to come from. we don't need to work together. Let's work together if it makes sense and is a win for both people. Yeah.
Does it always take 10 years of hard luck, or is there a faster path?
Yeah. If I could go back 10 years and talk to that version of myself, the things, it would come back to those two principles. Slow to hire, quick to fire. If you're not surrounded with the right people, that will slow you down more than anything. And not all revenue is created equally. Your best clients you'll like working with and be more profitable, and it's worth saying no. There's a lot of customers we've worked with over the years that they paid us a lot of money, but I'm not convinced we made any money on them because it was really hard to keep them happy, and there was never enough of what we could give them. And so when I look back at if those are the two things I did differently, I think we get where we are a lot faster with a lot less pain. And I don't think I could comprehend or even understand what I just said to you without going through that. And so that's where I'm like, yeah, I mean, it is what it is. That is what I would have told myself. The cool thing is now I know that, and I can continue to lean into that and move forward, because I do expect the size of the business to do 10 times the next 10 years what it's done the last 10 years as well. And so I think that these are the principles that learning those over the last 10 years is what allows me to grow the business to the next level as well.
And you're working less. So I have my favorite book up here, The Road Less Stupid. It's not Profit First, by the way. And that is a big part of it. It's about thinking through your business and also somewhat learning from other people's mistakes, and also learning to be letting go of your ego, right? To constantly question everything and to think through, are you the problem in the business, right? So even looking at employees, did I hire the right person? Was I clear with what I expected of them? Did I set the right culture? Did I exemplify that and explain it properly? Because if I haven't done all the things I'm supposed to do, that person can't succeed. And yet we blame that person always. And so that's kind of that bigger thinking of how to do that. What I have found, though, when most people look for a marketing company, they're like, hey, I need a Facebook ad. We need to sell more. And that's usually where they're coming from, which means they're not in the greatest of places always, because they're hungry for revenue, which here's the reality. Most businesses go through that struggle of generating consistent revenue over time. So what do you do, like when somebody comes to you and says, hey, we need more marketing, we need more revenue, we need Facebook ads?
It's we have a simple set of questions that we go through to understand, well, what are your goals? Why are those your goals? And most don't actually have real goals. Okay. And then it's because we want more.
So what's a real goal versus a not real goal that you talk about?
Yeah. Well, I guess depending on how you define anything, a not great goal to me is we just want more because we just want more. That doesn't feel like a goal, and that doesn't feel like there's a why behind it. And so a reasonable goal says, well, here's how much we'd like to grow, and here's how we'd like to, grow revenue and grow profitability. Those are the business objectives. Awesome. Those feel like good goals. Now it's, why are those your goals? And they say, well, because we want to grow. Well, why do you want to grow? And well, because X, Y, and Z. And usually you have to ask why about 5 times to actually get to the heart of, and they probably, most of the time, they haven't done this themselves, by the way. And by the time you get to the 5th why, they actually say what it really is about.
Is that 5th why, are there certain themes that always seem to show up, or are they vastly different based on the client?
2 themes. About 80 to 90% of the time, it's a very scarcity-driven goal. It's driven by not wanting to fail. Okay. And that's most of the time the underlying theme, because I don't want to look like, I don't want to lose my job. I don't want to be a failure. I don't want to have my business not perform. Like a lot of it's fear-based goals, or I won't be enough if we don't grow. And sometimes I have to read between the lines, but that's usually what it is. When you get to the why, people that can give you a good why and one or two answers have abundance mindset around their goals. And that's why I asked those questions that I shared with you earlier, which is, why did you start the business? What inspired you to start this? And what are those customer and employee success stories that have inspired you along the journey? And when the essence of those is the why behind your goals, then we will win together, because there will be more of a why. Because marketing, I will tell you this right now, you get a marketer that believes in you and your business, you will have great things happen. When a marketer doesn't believe in you and your business, usually it's a marketer that doesn't believe in themselves that works with that type of a business. And it doesn't work, because then you have a non-inspired marketer marketing for a non-inspired business, and it does not differentiate. It lands flat, or it's manipulative to get those things done. And so that's where I just try to get really, what's the why behind the goal? And let's redirect that back to the positive and abundance that inspired you to do this in the first place. And let's reconnect to that and build goals around that. And then the marketing becomes easy, because all the information we needed is shared in that process. Yeah.
I was going to say, how long does it take to do all of that and get that kind of clarity?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you this, we can tell in one meeting if they're willing to go there. Okay.
And what percent are willing to go there?
Well, we have that are willing to go there, 20%. We actually say no to most people that reach out to us to do work with us, because we can tell if, and I honor everyone where they're at in their journey. So this is not a judgment statement. But if the stage of the journey is revenue at all costs and we don't have a good why behind it, we're just not the right agency for that stage of the business. Not that I think that that's a bad place to be, because you'll learn your lesson. Life's about lessons. And when you've learned that lesson, then we're the right agency for you, and let's have a conversation.
I want people to think about that. Imagine turning away 80% of the people who show up at your front door because they're not a good fit for you. And you're okay with that. And if your business can't do that, well, I think the reflection might help.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we should have talked about that we didn't get a chance to?
You know, the one thing came up for me immediately when you asked that question, so I think that's what I'll address, is we always know the answer. And I think it's easy for us to get addicted to books, to podcasts, to whatever, to try and fix ourselves.
Especially this one.
Especially this one. Yeah. And it's easy to fall into the trap that the answer is outside of us. And what I would hope, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, Rocky, is I believe 100% that the answers are always inside of us, and that it's actually just having the courage to act on what we already know, not think, but what we know to be right. And so I actually don't believe the answers are ever outside of us. I think we can be inspired by other people's experiences to act on what we already know to be true to us. And so what do you think about that?
So on the other podcast, we talk about this all the time, right? The number one obstacle to your success is the mirror, right? It's just the reflection. Most business owners are the reason that they struggle. It's because of what they're not doing, or what they're not coming to grips with, or the fact that they aren't doing that. Now, along those same lines, I will say this. I think what books do is help you to open up a new thought pattern that you may not have had before. So, just because we're here, profit first is, wait a minute, and actually, I don't think profit first is nothing new. You've always been told pay yourself first, right? You've always been told spend less than you earn. Like, this is age old wisdom. I think what books do is help us to remind us of that, and then we can go have the reflection. Having a coach who can hold you accountable to that, I think, is a big part. I think what really sets the one thing that sets us really apart, and it's funny because I don't talk about this, and even when we go through our sales process, I'm starting to tell people kind of at the end of the sales process, by the way, when you first come to work with us, we're going to spend 2 hours having a conversation, and it has nothing to do with your business. I want to know your origin story. I want to learn about your money behaviors and how you behave with money, because how you behave with money is telling me how your business is going to behave with money. And we got to fix that more than likely. What are your goals? And you talked about your health, your kids, your family, your spirituality. We go through an exercise where I look at it like, where are you in all those places? Because it's like driving a Ferrari. If I've got a Ferrari that's got a flat tire or no gas or whatever, it's going nowhere. For me, the major aha was, if the business owner isn't in the right place mentally, physically, spiritually, they're not going to drive their business to success. That's just the reality of it. So they need to be there. And those are all the things that we assess and look at. And one of the other things we do, and we don't even charge for it, is we'll help you create your life plan. So if you don't know
That's
what
cool.
you want out of life, we'll sit down, and just as part of what we do, we'll help you create your life plan, which then helps you define your business plan and defines what you need out of the business. How much is enough? That's a question that most people can't answer. How much is enough? And when will you stop? Because otherwise it's the constant chase that will never end, right? You make $1 million, it's 2 million, 2 million, 10 million. I cannot tell you how many times I've had conversations or heard from business owners that went from 5 million, 10 million to 100 million, not making any more money in their pocket and killing themselves on the journey. And they're like, until they're in their 60s, they go, damn, I did that wrong. And
Yeah.
a classic example of that is Sam Walton. If you read Sam Walton's book, at the end of his book, he's in his hospital bed with his grandkids, and he's looking around going, I think I missed something, because he didn't
Yeah.
spend time with them all. And I make fun of Warren Buffett for the same thing. I'm not going to him for marriage advice or
No.
parenting advice. Man knows how to make money. God bless him. But yeah, all these other things come to be.
Yeah. Yeah, it's powerful. Thanks, Rocky.
You are most welcome. And thank you for joining us. If people want to be disruptive in their advertising, want to do this differently in their marketing, how do they find you? How do they learn more about you?
Yeah, I'd love to. I'm most active on LinkedIn. So if you want to connect personally, go ahead and hit me up there. And then the business is disruptiveadvertising.com. And we have a great strategy team that is always happy to do a free strategy consultation to say, let's just take a look at what your goals are, what's the why behind those goals, and what are the biggest gaps preventing you from getting those from a marketing standpoint. And we always provide that complimentary. A lot of the times we're not the best fit to execute that. Sometimes we are the best fit to execute that for these teams, depending on the business's situation. So if that's a conversation that would be helpful, then reach out to us there.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to this unedited video of the Profit Answer Man podcast. If you'd like to catch the full episode and learn more about what we do, check us out at profitcomesfirst.com. We also go through the Profit First book in each and every chapter in the beginning episodes of the podcast, so check those out as well. Thanks for listening, and here's to you having a more profitable and growing business.